Ask. What city is state? Airplane, not airplane. I'm so confused.
Private event.
So I'm just going to run a word from our sponsor, and then I'll.
Living if you're already there, it's not worth saying if it's already said. Even if it all goes over your head, believe it if you want to. So keep your eyes on the road and your head in the stars. Follow it down the rabbit hole just a little while longer. You can change anything if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to.
You're on.
Hello. Hello. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see you all here and the countless people watching us from home.
Hey.
All right. Next time you have to make it. My name is Seth Shore. I am the CEO of Fifth Street Gaming. I've been involved in esports around the casino industry since early 2015. I've had the pleasure of coming to all of the Fox's Casino and Esport Conference. Big fan of this conference. So it's good to see you back here in Las Vegas. Today we have a great panel. And I mean that sincerely. I was really excited when I got to learn about folks that we get to chat with today. To my left, we have David Chen and Jeff Cohen. And joining us from home is Daniel Cozy. I'll ask each of you to give us a little bit of your background, but I will tell all of you viewers and all of the audience that you're here for a real treat. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to sit with you. So today's panel is why are NFL and NBA teams partnering with esport companies? And I think this panel, each of your experience is very relevant to that topic. But for the record, full disclosure, should we go off topic and want to chat about other things? Do you guys mind? Anybody mind?
Let's do it.
No. All right. So we will do our best to have a fun and informative panel. But if you don't mind starting, at least the panelists can take a minute or two talking about your background. Daniel, the guy on Zoom, everyone always forgets about him. So let's start with you. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to talk to you all the way from Brazil. Unfortunately, we have what we have here, and I was forbidden to step inside your beloved and beautiful country. My fault, but I'm sure the next year we will be all together there in Las Vegas, promoting the conversation and debate about esports and how we do that on a regular day. And I'm from Wesco, the World Sport Consortium. Right now we have 144 countries, more than 1,000 members between government agencies, national and continental non-for-profit organizations to govern the institutional esports, and also private companies with us. We are developing a lot of events worldwide since 2010. Right now we have 3 huge accelerators, one in Hainan province is the esports city, literally. Then we have one arena in Beijing, another one in Shanghai, and a lot of things happening in Macau with the casinos.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to hearing more about that. For the record, if the Fox brothers listen to me, we're going to be in Brazil next year. So you just stay where you're at. That sounds fun. David.
I like your idea. I know we're going to be best friends, so Brazil sounds perfect. Can't wait to see you down there. My name is David Chen. I am the founding partner of the North American Collegiate League. We're a non-profit collegiate league in 220 universities in 30 countries. We started another league called the Latin America League that is in 16 countries. We have an open league. We have a lot of celebrities play. I invested into phase plans, so put them in a Super Bowl commercial, which was a super amazing thing, and realized that when A-Rod and Charlie Sheen were there, our guys are there for 1 second and have more engagement than A-Rod and Charlie Sheen did combined. And that's the power of esports. I'm an ex-Floyd managing partner, of course, and then we started our own news network where we're in 37 countries, 50 million audited viewers. including airport news called Any Son Knows All, where we talk about news. I teach at SMU and I'm in college, some of the colleges. I love the game. That's the thing I do the most. I love helping people and greatest community of people ever. And I'm super excited to be with you guys. Legends of the field. Thank you for having me.
Jeff.
Awesome. Hey everyone, Jeff Cohen, I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Head of Investor Relations at Esports Entertainment Group. We're a publicly traded esports betting operator. We also own a chain of LAN centers. We do player versus player betting and esports infrastructure software. Prior to EEG, I worked at an investment bank called Stevens Inc. as an equity research analyst covering gaming esports space.
Well, thank you guys. I have to tell you, having been on many panels over the years, it's really neat to be on a panel with gentlemen that are doing so much. I mean, this is really very impressive. So let's at least let's start on our topic. Already asked us, and I think Jeff, knowing what I know about the Esports Entertainment Group, you guys are leading the effort. You guys are leading the charge in terms of helping teams with their esports strategies. I mean, you're working with so many teams. I don't know who else has an opportunity to work with a team. Tying them all up. So we'd love to hear your perspective. How EEG is working with teams.
Yeah. We're trying to lock up as many as possible, I guess. This all started really about just over a year ago, really, when a lot of the pro teams were mired in COVID, and first the leagues were completely shut down, obviously, and then when they opened up, there were no fans in the stands. They were struggling with ways to engage with their fans. And then another thing that happened was when all these teams went into the bubble, I think a lot of the executives noticed that they brought two things with them. They brought their clothes and all their equipment, and then they brought their gaming equipment. And they realized, wow, all of our players are gamers, and a lot of our fans are gamers. So why don't we use gaming to engage with our fans and kind of build the community that way? So I think it was really the Eagles that first reached out to us with that idea. We had just around this time bought an esports tournament platform called Esports Gaming League that was primarily working in Europe. We decided to bring them here to the US, partner with these teams. So what we've done is they really become our marketing partner and kind of our affiliate. They market the tournaments to their fans, and the fans come and participate for innovative prizes for the teams. So whether it's season tickets, that's obviously a pretty basic prize, but then it can be meet with a player or play in a game of Madden against the starting quarterback, or travel on the team jet to an away game, stuff like that. Kind of money can't buy prizes. So I think it's been an innovative marketing strategy for both them and clearly for us as well. So that's one way we work with them. We've also had conversations about working with them on building gaming centers at their stadiums. So we acquired a company this past year called Helix Esports. They own a chain of LAN centers, which luckily, so I do investor relations, and typically when we talk about Wall Street folks, I have to explain what a LAN center is. I think in this room I probably don't, so thankful to not have to do that. So Helix owns a number of LAN centers, the biggest one of which is at Patriot Place in Foxborough. So a lot of the other NFL teams and teams we're partnering with are looking at that model and trying to replicate it in their own stadiums to bring people in different days of the year, that aren't the 8 days where they have home games.
Thank you. Daniel, I know you have an international perspective on esports. Have you seen in other countries, in other professional leagues, have you seen them incorporate esports into their strategy?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last phrase?
Sure. So internationally, have you seen professional teams, whether soccer teams or other teams, incorporate esports into their strategy?
Yes, a lot, especially those teams, those clubs coming from football or soccer. On the other hand, you have a lot of private esports teams, most of them from Europe, very well succeeded, some of them from the United States, very well succeeded, because the business model they have and what they can achieve, and they can construct and create opportunities to different kind of situations. You have incumbents and you have more possibilities to share what you have. This is not still happening in Brazil. We are still in a lower level concerning the business model, but also you have a total different users from the Asian countries, especially China, where I have my interference. So there is a lot of things happening, especially in the private sector. And now, with the institutional side coming up with the Olympic movement, we can all see wonderful opportunities for business in the private and institutional sides.
Thank you. David, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the way the world works, being one of the owners of FacePlan, seeing how we're integrating on the cover of Sports Illustrated, right? You have Ronnie James, the next generation superstar 14. You have Kyler Murray, D1 great player. It's a lifestyle and a movement now that 40 years ago, if you looked at sports, we looked at sports cards, we looked at comic books, it wasn't part of popular lifestyle culture. Why is it now such a big investment? Because our age group can now afford it, right? So that's where the real value starts coming in as a lifestyle thing. The NACL does something really interesting is we have 40 of the biggest athletes. So from Brian Urlacher to Rick Barry to Aaron Jones to Paige Hathaway or Flex Lewis and even Facebook's founder of FaZe, all part of it. And we have a really international presence, which makes it really interesting. Our news channel captures that also in China, which is very interesting, right? I mean, you don't typically have any North American news in China, but we will pull that off. And in 2 years, went from 1 to 30 countries. And you talk about sports and branding. We work with the San Antonio Spurs, and we did a 5,000 person tournament with the English Premier League Wolves, and the winners got to try out for their esports FIFA team. Right? So the kid that won from Uruguay was taking 12 guys pro. Why do they want to do that? Because they want to be branded. They want to brand themselves to younger people. So all these gentlemen up here are absolutely just phenomenal hearing them talk. But that's where I see the future of that in sports.
Awesome. I'll throw this out to anybody on the panel. Now that professional teams have been incorporating esports into their strategies for a couple of years, have we seen the synergies between the NBA and NBA 2K, or NFL and Madden? Have those synergies been more successful than, say, a professional sports team sponsoring a Counter-Strike team or a non-sports game?
Yeah, great question, by the way. I think it's interesting because when you talk about them integrating and going from there, first off, it can't be the guys who, I really didn't want to do this project, so now I'm stuck doing 2K and NHL. They're not purists, right? When you're smiling, you know what I'm talking about? They don't really want to do it, so they don't give it a fair shake. The best thing I ever heard was this theory about baseball, which went like this. Ted Hirsch, who owns the Rangers and Fuel, he said to me, if MLB disappeared today, the Rangers would disappear. But if the Rangers were in FIFA, basketball, hockey, whatever, the brand would stay. So in esports, we know that's what matters. It's the brand and the building, not risking one game, one title. So I think it makes a pretty significant difference. I think secondly is you're the number 2 man playing a World Bond Lockett, who's always on every single thing in the Suit Shopping, the 2K League. And I think if there was a better promotion and people that treat it as the NBA viewership should be the same as 2K, which I wish it would be because I love 2K. It's a different thing. But you are hitting a new generation of young ballers who really buy avatars and skins and crazy things like that. So it's an exciting thing that we can do together. You start the guys in college and high school, so what we can do.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it there. The synergy, the way you asked about it, the synergy is probably greater when you have the sport melting with the kind of the linear with the digital. But I think the activations and kind of just the overall popularity have been better than some of the baseline kind of things.
Great, thank you.
I think it gets even better because when you have the branding, you have all the opportunities coming with that. Now you have the metaverse, you have NFTs, you have cryptocurrency, on the whole blockchain ecosystem. You can promote and you can create some values for instance, for a player or a team, their brand, their participation with NFTs. So this is coming to a new reality for us, and we should be quite aware and prepared for that.
That's great. You literally took the words out of my mouth, so thank you. How do you see incorporating, as Daniel just mentioned, NFTs, crypto, blockchain into esports strategy? And are we sure that the NBA, NFL aren't just grasping for straws to keep their popularity and brand in front of future generations? How do we make sure that esports isn't a passing fad that gets overlooked and they move on to the next thing?
On the last part of the question, I think it's about authenticity. It's a little bit what was mentioned before, but it can't be the last straw that's picked. Oh, you have to now run the NBA 2K league, and the guy's like, no, I want to run the NBA All-Star game. Oh, I guess I'm going to take this project. It needs to be run by passionate gamers and people who are building it the right way. I guess that's the last part. I think you're going somewhere with the NFTs.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Two questions hidden in one. Do you see NFTs? Are you incorporating NFTs into your?
NFTs are super fascinating. And I think the concept of digital ownership, the way I view it is like NFTs, digital ownership, are going to be a mechanic in games. Like I see in a few years, all the big major publishers will incorporate it the same way they've all incorporated in-game advertising, in-game purchases. But what I have an issue with now in the ecosystem is that it feels like a lot of these blockchain games are just creating a blockchain game that isn't fun. The only reason people are playing it is because they can kind of earn money or because they think what they're doing is going to end up being worth more. So to me, I don't think that part of the ecosystem is necessarily sustainable. But the mechanic of blockchain in games and being able to own digital items and kind of create an avatar and kind of have that ownership transfer throughout the metaverse, if you want to use that buzzword, I think that's clearly a trend that's here to stay.
I'm pretty happy in crypto and NFTs. I mean, before esports, I was crypto that Snoop Dogg was part of the company, vice president, CFO, and before that I was at Deloitte. So the crazy part about the story is, we had a chance to go to Princeton in the 2020 initiative to make the whole country smart city. The very first crypto payout system partnered with Ethereum and Consensus. We co-built, so that Community Gaming.net was our company that we did with them. And I really get that space pretty well because we did a public ICO at TechCrunch, and the integration of it is no different than the virtual currency that we currently have that people can buy. But to your point, it cannot be inauthentic because, yeah, it's a quick cash grab, and eventually we're going to get bored. They'd rather play and have fun and still make it money. My biggest fear is the regulatory side of it. KYC, somebody said the financial implications, pumping and dumping, hurting innocent people who are just trying to be better and they love the passion of the game. We have to be very cautious about that. But I do see it working in it because it can shift the energy of wealth, which is impressive.
Okay, thank you guys. So here we are at the Casino Esports Conference. And while I'm always a little biased and tend to focus on Las Vegas, we know that the global casino industry spans across the globe. We're very lucky to have a few individuals on the panel who have had experience in Macau. I would love to hear your experience with esports and Macau. So David or Daniel, whoever wants to go first, please.
Daniel, please go ahead.
David, please.
I'm from Taipei, right? So when we were at Deloitte, the crazy thing is we did 75% of the audience from casinos. Macau's a very interesting place because of the way the Portuguese are, the way Hong Kong is with people from England. And what makes it interesting is they're almost in the pivotal front of casino boards. It's an absolutely phenomenal thing, and they have less regulations. I love working out over there because it shows a couple things. Number one, the need for esports betting, because they are on the forefront of it, the regulatory environments that exist, the transparency, unlike what had happened in 2K, where they already knew it won. Unfortunately, the guys who were doing that lost millions of dollars. That is significant for the health of esports, and it's going to be big, right? I mean, the reality is, 20 years ago, if you sat there and said people were going to, gamble in certain sports, it was going to be on an app. There's no way you thought it was going to happen. They said the same thing about Netflix. Look what happened now, right? So I think it's going to happen really, really importantly, and then for us, because we have a news channel, anything that's happening over there, combining with people like yourselves, we can put the best news and the right news onto the airwaves and really kind of shift the public's eye views instead of just bought in ads, or they don't really generally care about the community as much as we do.
Yeah, back in 2018, I started a deal with a lawyer office in Macau, and I went to Zhuhai in China to sign an agreement with them to promote esports championships that would connect Macau and Las Vegas. And by the end of 2009, the project was okay. We got a green light, and then 2020, here we are, with nothing happened so far. But I hope 2021 will be a great year because it has to be a great year because we have everything prepared. And that connects to the internal championship where the teams are going to be invited and the other teams from the region are going to play inside the casinos in a rolling system, one by one. And then the champions coming to probably Las Vegas to do something there. But it is, I can tell no more because otherwise it's a spoiler. I'm ruining all the event. But on the other hand, we have something happening in Cancun that's going to go to a cruise ship. And this cruise ship is going to go to New York, to Miami, and come back to Mexico. And then the winner is going to another casino in Las Vegas to finish all the games. So we have a lot of things, and this is our relation with casinos. We want to promote these sport championships and also some activities within the casino's environment. We even have a reality show inside a casino. It's going to be a fighting between startups inside a casino environment. That would be great too.
So I have no experience in combat. I would like to pose a question to these guys, if I may. I'm curious what your guys' view is on kind of the impact of some of these Chinese regulations on the esports kind of sector, if you could.
I mean, first off, Daniel, I think me and Jeff would always like to go on that cruise. So let us know where it is. It sounds super exciting. You already got us on there. I love it.
Who's going to take Jeff on his first encounter?
Let's do it. I got you. It's going to be fun. Regulatory violence always exists, and the funny thing about gamers is they have an uncanny ability to change the system. Right? We've seen this with Reddit, we've seen this with GameStop. In China, it's the same thing. The reality is it's just their VPN. So, that exists because 14 and under, they feel a certain way. The government has to regulate the way they want to. But anyone who wants to game go through the VPN process, and therefore they avoid it. So hopefully I just spoil it for anybody out there in China. But at least that is the truth, and they're still going to game and do their thing. All right, I guess I got the answer. All right.
No, I think it's a good question. I mean, look at what China just did with crypto. Navigating any regulations are tricky. All Chinese regulations is a whole nother level. We'll see how that works out. So I've heard a few of both Daniel and David. It sounds like you guys both have some sort of media platforms. Would love to hear more about them.
Daniel, please go first.
Oh, please, if you can go first because the last part was broken.
Oh, okay. What we did was interesting. How do you get the news out, not just to gamers, but to mainstream people? How do we get on MSNBC? How do we get on NBC? How do we talk about the amazing things you're doing, the amazing things you're doing in our brand new cruise with Daniel over there? How do we talk about it? Well, it's hard because we're all trying to get in a space where a lot of people don't understand it. If you took out the word esport and you put in any other name, baseball, basketball, hockey, our job would be 1,000 times easier. We all know this, right? We're visionaries. What we realized real quickly was, why not have your own sports center? That's what we did. We went into Reach TV, which has 7 channels, in every major airport in the United States, Canada, Dubai. At a time where the CNNs are now leaving the airports, they've taken over. Our show is 7 minutes, 5 days a week. 5 times a day for 7 minutes, 7 days a week, to 40 million audited viewers, Nielsen audited viewers. So now when you go to a traditional person like an American Express, and you say, this is the gauge so you understand the viewership, here is a Nielsen audited, it works. And for the CEOs of the companies, what makes this really, really interesting is we obviously charge for ads and ad space, but it's 40 million audited viewers, and we charge a quarter of, normally it's about $6 million to that many viewers, they charge a quarter. But it's interesting because you get 90 seconds to really talk about what's going on with the thing, that's 40 million people. So it makes it much more easy. In Asia, we have 20 million people, and I host that channel. But we are in China, we're in 20 other countries, and it's a 30-minute show about news. So we talk about highlights, what's going on in ACL. We've actually mentioned your company. You've actually mentioned your company. He has those clips. But the most innovative stuff, and that's important, right? So now you capture the traditional market, the international market, and then we still do what we're trying to do with our own platform, things of that sort. But the celebrities help. I mean, when you get a guy like Senator Oro, who used to be WWE Tag Team Champion, it's 5 million people, or Brian Urlacher, or someone as old as Hall of Famer Rick Barry, or as young as Clips, we have the full spectrum why all these athletes have invested to become partners in ACL because they recognize the international brand side of it, and we can get it in China. That's what I did at Deloitte before this was my partner in China. So the regulatory environment I understand very, 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 very well, and that's kind of gives us an advantage. And we both have partners as well. It really helps.
Yeah, one interesting thing that I was thinking about here right now is when we were talking about the teams, right? And how the regular teams like a soccer team or a football team, whatever, they try to engage, they try to have esports with their system. It's all it's not about likes or followers anymore. It's about engagement, how they can review their fans, the audience, people watching their games, watching their matches. And esports is bringing that, very, very solid thing. Especially here in Brazil, you can see that. So the teams, most of the time, they allow other players to use their brand. But that's the wrong way. They have to have the esports inside their system to promote them, to create engagement and new players. Because if I am a fan of a soccer team here in Brazil, believe me, people will die for it. But on the other hand, if we know that the esport players, the esport audience is quite singular in this respect because they cheer up for a specific player or a specific team. And if they know someone else is coming to that brand, they don't accept that. So that's why it's so important, especially for the business right now. Just came to my mind that a soccer team or a brand from a team create his own esport ecosystem to bring more their fans, their loyal fans, than any other thing right there. And I think we can do that, especially with what we do here. I mean, it's promoting betting, it's promoting gaming in the casino environment. I mean, for me, from my point of view, it's a perfect match, really.
So David, you have a very interesting background. You're doing so much. College league. How important is the betting leagues?
I mean, it's going to happen no matter what, right? Whether we do it or not, and it's a matter of who's going to do it first, right? First doesn't always means right, but first always means if you do it right, you get the market share, prove it over and over and over again, right? I think it's going to be important for people like us to lead the charge because we're so purists in the game, right? The last thing we need is some giant scandal like the 1907 White Sox per se, or 17 months ago. It's even too old at this point. But my point is, a scandal like that involves esports. We want to be pure. We want to do it right. We want to make sure that the kids 20 years from now have that integrity. We don't want to poison our things. So guys like us, I think, on the panel will be a significant piece of it. This is why I love things like CEC, Fox Brothers, because they understand the importance of putting this together and really having transparency, right? We don't want to poison the well before it gets there and becomes a major issue. So I wholeheartedly think it's going to happen very, very soon. Probably soon. I'm probably sure all four of us work on something. It's probably amazing at that point.
I would even go as far as to say it's happening already. And I think one of the themes at this conference, on all the panels, watching them, is that this is happening already. I think one of the issues that regulators have, and I think one of the fears that people have, is that there's a lot of underage betting or potential for there to be underage betting. And really the response to that is that we have to bring this into the light of day, regulate it, and have it in a safe environment, because that's really the only way to ensure that we don't have those problems. Because the last thing the industry needs, like David just mentioned, is sort of a scandal, whether it's a match being thrown or, hey, the old headline of some 12-year-old kid got his parents' credit card and bet $10,000 on a match and lost. No regulated operator wants that, and no regulated operator would allow that because they lose their license. So I think it's really important that we do that, and that regulators work with operators that are willing to work with them and create frameworks to kind of ensure that sort of purity and safety.
I think you're right, because one of the things we most have in mind right now is to keep the integrity of the esports ecosystem, and also those who are coming to have a career inside the esports, and considering about match fixing and also illegal microtransactions within the esports, when it is happening right now, we are quite aware of that. And that's why we have so much attention to the blockchain, because using their technology, we can prevent some of the problems from happening, and we can empower the athlete, the practitioner of the esports in a more transparent way. So that's one of the things we care a lot.
Well, thank you, guys. At this point, it's 2:30. I'd love to get some questions from the audience. Anybody have any questions? And come and stick a microphone in front of your face.
I actually have a question.
All right.
So my question is, I guess, would be for Jeff. And the question is, EEG, when they first started, they were partnering with a lot of the sports teams. And that's why kind of was my inspiration for the panel in the first place, because I was trying to find out or figure out how that connection would help the industry or the esports industry. When obviously there's a lot of athletes or pro athletes that play esports, but what's the angle there? Just curious.
I mean, I don't want to necessarily speak for the whole industry, but I think we look at it as just a market. And these teams have passionate fans that are both fans of the team and are gamers. So for us, it's just a really good way for us to reach that audience. So that's kind of the way we think about it, and not that dissimilar to how when a DraftKings partners with a pro sports team, it's really just to kind of reach their fans. So that's really kind of the way we think.
Also, and this is open to the other comments, do you guys think that from the wagering side of the esports, are the platforms that are actually offering esports at the moment doing a good job, getting the punters there, and to turn over, because one of our first panels was yesterday. David Isaacson from Spectrum said that there was about $1 billion being made in esports wagering, which from a money perspective is not nothing, but he's it's not that impressive at the moment. So where do you see from that perspective being, that sports is so much wagered on all the time? Do you feel that esports can get a bump on the wagering side by being connected to the sports side?
I guess I would push back slightly on David's comment that that's not impressive, just given there are numbers out there that the entire esports industry revenue is $1 billion. So the fact that esports betting would be, basically the same, that's decently impressive. I think David's point is relative to the entire traditional sports betting industry. It's still a small piece. I think a lot of that is because right now the bigger operators, particularly here in the U.S., are focused just on the larger opportunity and bringing in kind of mass mainstream casual audience. And so what I always like to say is those brands, if you're someone who's a traditional sports fan first and you want to bet on sports, once in a while, if you're watching a big event, they will typically over time, as regulations allow, have an experience that's fine for that customer. But what I think is missing right now in the ecosystem, and hoping that our company will be one of the ones that is at the forefront here, is a tailored experience for esports first fans. Marketed to them, the user experience is what they're looking for, because it is a very different user experience traditional sports fan, or sports bettor, I'm one myself, you go on the app, you bet, you go watch the game at the bar or, on your couch, you don't stay on the app. So esports bettors, they're typically watching on a stream, they're doing live betting, micro betting, who gets the next kill. So it's a very different user experience, and I don't think the bigger companies are focused on that opportunity just yet. So I think as other companies start to focus on that and put marketing dollars kind of behind that, I think that $1 billion number will definitely expand.
So then I want to ask also Daniel, if is this happening, and maybe you covered it earlier, but is this happening in Brazil with connecting to like the pro football or soccer, as we call it in the United States, leagues, adopting esports also in their stadiums with their teams?
Not so much. They are still in the embryonic way. They are not at that high level yet because they need to understand that most of the teams, if you go to talk to the presidency of a football team, or even the directors, the marketing directors, they ask, okay, what kind of video game should I buy so my players could see? So this is the kind of understanding so far. Some of the teams here, like Corinthians, like Flamengo, they already have something starting from the grassroots maybe, but it is not so much your environment to really have this kind of private lease the same way you have in the United States. By far, you have a most advanced business model for the esports so far. It's very in the beginning here. I mean, no matter if they are already playing, there are teams doing League of Legends or Fortnite or whatever. The business model is not ready. The business model is not clear and solid. That's the gap. You can have esports teams within your sports team, within your football club, but if you don't have a solid business model, just entertainment for fun. You are not going to make money. You are going to promote the integrity of the ecosystem. That's it. It's pretty much that here in Brazil.
Oh, thanks. One more question for Daniel. Sorry. For David. So, David, you're involved in the college level esports, and colleges more or less in general use high level regular conventional sports like football and stuff like that to gather dollars from alumni, to gather dollars from sponsors, etc., like that. Do you see colleges mimicking that in the esports space?
I think it's going to happen. I mean, like the athletic director for Arkansas State, for example, is the same. He's also out there for esports. So Adidas is working with Arkansas State Red Wolves to become one of their partners. One of our partners is a good example. It's interesting to talk about this betting thing and what you're saying. And the reality is, esports betting are either people who are in the know, who are in our age group, who are usually in their 30s and under, and traditional betting like us, or guys who are parents or 50 and up who understand it. So they're still asking, why do you want to watch esports when they're watching tennis matches and you're not even playing in tennis? And you're like, oh, that makes sense, right? So the people who are starting here, especially the casino side, they're just becoming the grandfathers where they can catch up. And to your point as well, I mean, in all the programs, there's so many different programs. There's clubs, there's varsity programs. So ones who are really doing it right now, doing scholarships, and that's where the advantage is. And so as I'm teaching at SMU, top 3 sports management group, school in the world, I'm teaching esports. I have athletes. I have, the biggest college stars coming in there. Heck, even with the UIL role, we have guys from Ohio State who are brand ambassadors at ACL. And the reason is simple. They want to get the branding out. They understand this. They're more sophisticated now. They're 18, 19, 20s. I think I ever could have been at that age. And that's where I see the difference coming in. Colleges are starting to take this seriously. There's over 100 universities that give out scholarships every single year. We've done enough combines. That is the future of the league. We're doing all this stuff.
Yes, sir. We're trying to do the same here, especially with the Wisco environment. I mean, we have a high degree course inside Suzhou in China. And we're bringing that to the school as well, to promote the esports at a higher level, also within the university. It's not only a post degree or an extension course or an MBA, it will be a real university course for 4 years. That's what we are doing right now in the University of Football in Suvaija. We are trying to replicate that same model here. But of course, you have your own national step-by-step legal way with your educational plan. But we will try to promote that, because you can have kids and young men, having geography, maths, and engineering, programming, Internet of the Things, 3D, motion capture, and also the esport core categories such as player, culture, whatever. So we can bring it on. It is a huge, huge business.
Thank you. We have a question in the back.
Yeah, I wanted to tag on to Ari's question about the sports betting. It was mentioned in an earlier session that the top 3 betting titles were Dota 2, League of Legends, Fortnite, if I understood that correctly. But the top traditional sports platform that's bet is FIFA. Do you guys think that that's because of the popularity of soccer in Europe, and that Europe is ahead of the States in the sports betting on the esports side? And then if you had to project one of the traditional sports platforms to kind of take the forefront of sports betting or esports betting, which would you think would come out ahead?
I'll touch on that. Not 100% sure if the games that you mentioned are the top 3 games, but they're probably all in the top 10. I think CS:GO still is up there. In terms of FIFA, what I can speak to, many years ago at this point, I held cash esports tournaments in our casino here in Las Vegas, hundreds of them. And one of the learnings that we were able to observe were what game genres drove most alcohol sales and drove the oldest game. And we just modified value in terms of age, right? So to me, a 28-year-old is more valuable than a 22-year-old every day. Okay? There's no question that FIFA had the oldest and biggest drinkers, period, end of story, not even a close second. So I don't know if that, to your point, it has something to do with the fan, the age group, and the propensity to gamble. That was my experience there.
And drink.
And drink, definitely drink. No question about it. There was a lot of drinking and just a lot of fun in general. It was a really good audience. I do want to also just clarify one thing. I think it is important. This kills me. I'm a gambling executive at my core, and when we talk about revenue, there is a lot of misnomers around revenue and handle. 2 very, very, very different things. $1 billion in revenue actually is a pretty solid number. Mobile sports wagering in North America, which is obviously relatively new, is probably in the teens. When you look at global sports betting, of course, the number grows quite a bit. People get very confused when major companies like DraftKings talk about handle. It's that's the amount wagered, right? So sports betting wins about 5% of that. So it's a little tricky. Sometimes it's done intentionally. Sometimes it's just done, lack of understanding. But I do think the numbers that Jeff was talking about actually are rather impressive. I think we all agree that there will only continue to be great growth around esports betting.
Yeah, if I can just add to what you were saying, and I completely agree with what you're saying, is, there's 14 approved games in China. FIFA's one of them. Alibaba, the Wolves, we both partnered up together. We're partnered with the Wolverhampton Wanderers for that reason. There's 14 games. Gambling itself, it's no secret that Chinese or Asians are a big part of the gambling world. So the fact that you can go into those countries leading with FIFA, that's part one. With 70% that's there, that's why we focused to have a news channel, and we're probably the ones that stream into China while we're doing our tournaments. We're streaming on Chinese platforms. That is where I see the future coming on, and us integrating together as a whole, which I see that we're all doing this, and bringing even those people, I think on a global capacity, you're going to get more people, because obviously we still call it soccer here, right? Everyone else laughs at us when we say soccer. Oh, you mean American football, not football, right? But that's where I see it. It's a more global title, but people actually will gamble, and it's a more popular game. It's the most popular game in China. I mean, it's not even the NBA, it's football. So I see that really, cohesively becoming a big gambling part of it down the road.
We have a question here.
Yeah, thanks all of you for your time. But one of the things I've seen working a lot in the industry, and I work with a lot of NBA 2K gamers, is the laws are behind, obviously, the technology. So, for example, Ticino or Flight 23 or some of the top streamers, they gamble with each other because it's legal. So they'll do wage bets, put it in their headline on Twitch or whatever platform they're streaming on. Now they're gambling against each other, but it's unregulated. And as long as no one else is allowed to piggyback off their gamble, it's legal. What are your guys' thoughts on that affecting the popularity from a sports perspective? Because I worked in sports, as David knows, for 20 years, and I have a ton of sports clients coming to me from military institutions to, we just did an event for New Era Hat Company, asking us to do all these events. But to his point, where if you replaced esports with baseball, they'd all be jumping in. But our events get convoluted because we end up on the phone with our legal department, literally for 6 months, talking about, I hate to say it, but nonsense, because they're scared and they're more concerned about CYA than anything else. But what are your thoughts on the time frame for these laws to start catching up with what we're seeing in actuality every day online?
It's a great question. I mean, first of all, the legal framework of the United States is complicated because what you're talking about is well on a state-by-state basis, right? So there never will be any federal gambling laws or even federal laws around skill gaming, which is, I think, what you're referring to, which is technically legal if done in the right way in many, definitely not all states, and I'm not even going to throw a number out there because there is a legal opinion that's differing the number of states where that is legal. So I think, short of being able to show your client a clearly written law or legal opinion, there needs to be credible associations that are giving these clients, major institutions that don't want to risk their reputation, a precedent that something is okay, right? So there are organizations throughout the United States that are starting to pop up that that can help educate on what is allowed and isn't allowed. Most of my experience is here in Nevada, and it's the very first thing I realized that I had to personally do as a casino licensee is get our regulators comfortable with esports and what esports betting could be, and it's been a very long 7-year journey. But I can tell you, I'm happy to say that today the Nevada Gaming Control Board finally has a division just around esports, so that we can start as a state to decide what esports matches, tournaments, leagues meet the minimum integrity standards and governing principles where wagers should be placed. While that only applies to Nevada, I'd like to think, is the gold standard for wagering, so other jurisdictions could choose to either follow our lead explicitly or do something similar.
Yeah, awesome. I think the player versus player, skill-based wagering market is one that's huge. And the analogy that I always hear talked about, I think is a good one, is thinking about it relative to golf. So I think golf is a good analogy for esports in the sense that most esports fans also play esports. It's not necessarily the same. Like I'm an NFL fan, I don't go play football, anymore on weekends. Whereas golf, most golf fans also play golf. So when I bring it back to the player versus player wagering, I would be willing to say there's 100 times more money bet on golf courses every day than there is bet on traditional sports books, on whether Tiger Woods is going to win the Masters. So
Which is illegal on Nevada, by the way.
we did,
Can't bet on golf. Interesting. Skill-based gaming, I'm sorry to interrupt, but to your point, most people don't realize that betting on a golf course, me betting against you is illegal, and we're one of the states whose skill-based gaming laws don't allow that. And so I think it's the mechanics also, the two streamers that you mentioned, yeah, them placing a friendly wager, okay, in many states, but not all. You taking a piece of that action or having a big, all of a sudden, now you're in a gray, if not black and white. So it's not as black and white as sorry, Joe.
sorry. The last thing I was just gonna say is I actually think because there is a framework of companies of skills, even the daily fantasy companies that kind of blazed a little bit of a trail about where this is legal and not legal, or at least somewhat you can get away with it from a regulatory perspective. The bigger kind of roadblock that I've seen from experience and just my intuition is the publishers. I think if you build any sort of business of scale that's player versus player betting, you are going to get a call pretty quickly once it gets to any level that's of magnitude from a publisher saying, hey, cease and desist or give us a large percentage of that revenue. Because publishers still are very hesitant around gambling. At least that's my intuition.
Well, that's about all the time. If there's any other questions that we have from the audience, I appreciate you guys coming on. And hopefully next year we can have Daniel, you in person. Would be
When you
nice.
rest the room, or we decided we're all going to Brazil.
All right, we're all going to Brazil. We'll have a CEC in Brazil. If
That would be wonderful.
we'll have it at your house, Daniel.
Do a CEC in China, the IDEE Expo. I'm inviting you right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sounds
I'm
good.
not going to a conference in China that has casino on it. We don't believe in China.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, David. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Daniel. We'll see you all next year, hopefully in better circumstances and not understanding. Thank you.
All right, want to take a picture?
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Actually, you want to get at it? Maybe. Yeah, you got a good.
One, two, three. We got one more.
Anything else? See, yeah. All right, cool.
Living if you're already there, it's not worth saying if it's already said. Even if it all goes over your head, believe it if you want to. So keep your eyes on the road and your head in the stars. Follow it down the rabbit hole just a little while longer. You can change anything if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to. Sing it like ooh. worth saying if it's already said. Even if it all goes over your head, believe it if you want to. So keep your eyes on the road and your head in the stars. Follow it down the rabbit hole just a little while longer. You can change anything if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to.
George, go ahead.
Awesome. So, hello guys. This is the panel for, is there a collaboration gap between the video game publishers and the gambling industry? So, I would like for my two wonderful people from the panel here to introduce themselves first. If that would be
the CEO of Chicken Waffle. We're a game development studio in Austin, Texas, focused on creating immersive content and interactive experiences. We've done a wide variety of games, marketing experiences, as well as recently a lot of like social events in various different metaverse platforms.
Yeah, I'm Bill Dustin. I'm the CFO of Chicken Waffle. I also own a company called Cenotech, which is a location-based virtual reality place. And I also worked in the casino industry for, I think, 1996. You know, in different formats and selling different products and stuff.
fantastic. So, I think most probably the best place to really get this started off is, from your personal points of view, where do you think most people get in terms of esports, and why do you think that?
So as mentioned earlier, the like 90%, if not more, of all esports gambling is done on the top three games: League of Legends, Counter-Strike Go, and Dota 2. And that's because of the strong community that's already behind those games. And so essentially, because esports and gambling on esports is such a new pioneering industry, essentially what we're finding is that the industry is chasing the community versus the industry dictating the community top down. But as we're seeing some of these other games coming out, I think we're going to start seeing more of that top-down structure where the game is made to function well for the industry or for the gambling industry, and then the community, basically growing based upon the fandom and accolade that people can, really win big money playing these esports games as a player versus just focusing on the top tier players in a competitive environment for a tournament. There's going to be an opportunity for people to come together and bet against each other and play in the casinos on the games themselves.
Fantastic. Bill, what about, from your perspective, where do you really see, do you see any games currently maybe playing a role in the future of betting within esports, and if so, what ones, and how do you think it can help really change and evolve?
Yeah, as it relates to betting, I think the esports community really has to work with the regulators on rules, what type of licensing that different people would need. I have my views of asking the publishers to be licensed when it's almost like asking the NFL team to be licensed. That's kind of ridiculous. I think more they got to work with the regulators as the betting platforms, distributors of betting platforms. Definitely have to be licensed because that's where it can be fixed. I do understand because it's software related, the regulators are thinking, hey, we have to get like, the publishers of Dota, or, the top of that, what we're talking about, to get licensed. That's really going to be an impossible thing. I mean, it's never going to take off if they want to do something like that. But I do understand the regulators' concerns.
So, really, let's say going back to Chicken Waffle, you guys being a publisher, what role do you really see yourselves playing in the state betting industry, or how would you hope the Chicken Waffle to play a role in the betting industry?
Sure. So one of our new games, Blazer League, it's a really fun, fast-paced esports game in virtual reality. And we built a cool bracket system that allows for this like tournament experience where essentially players will buy into the tournament and compete against each other for the kitty. And so the championship winner will essentially win the pool that everybody's been putting in order to compete in the tournament. And so that's really exciting to be kind of, jumping into that space and working with some really amazing people, here in Vegas and, just really planting our feet and preparing for this next stage. And as a publisher and developer, that's really where it has to start. It had, in the past, it's been these very popular games that, because there's a community and people competing to be the best, that's where professional gaming came from. These people that are sponsored and influencers and stuff, they get sponsored, so they're essentially the professional gamer. But I think the next era of professional gaming is going to be essentially this, this play to win, this play to earn, and play to compete, and compete to win real money in a casino. I think is a very exciting thing especially for something like virtual reality, where it takes physical dexterity and coordination, and people are really getting into it. It's more fun to watch, and it's really exhilarating and fast paced, and that's just it really feels like the evolution of gaming.
Fantastic. So, Bill, from your standpoint, do you think a game publisher really needs to early on establish whether they want to, in theory, go down the road of esports, or if they want it to be part of, let's say, the esports community and circuit and really develop a full esports program behind it, or do you think there's something in which can be developed at that stage when you have people who are backing behind it and where the community can try and drive esports out?
Well, I think they can do both. I mean, it really depends on the company. As relates to like very large companies, it's going to be very hard for again, back to license and regulation point. We definitely have a small indie developer like us, we're willing to get licensed in this field. So, we can shine more, in that field. But definitely the big games, it's going to be a big issue for the really get going in the gaming industry.
So you talked quite a lot about really, let's say, what essentially needs to change. So in terms of licensing and also really for publishers to work more with the gambling industry, what would you say needs to change moving forward to really open that up a lot more in the future?
Well, it's not what's changing. A lot of regulations, I think, haven't been made yet. I think people in the esports industry needs to work with the casinos and with the regulators on having sensible regulation that protects the interests of the customer, but just have some sort of sensible regulation. So it's very important. I think the esports community really, if they don't work with them, they're just going to take their old regulations as relates to other things and be like, these are regulations, like a slot machine, different jurisdictions have different types of licensing, where they have what they call like a manufacturer's license, a vendor license. So we really have to work with the industry on, who's going to be licensed, why they need to be licensed, and what that consists of.
And what about from your standpoint, Finn? How do you think, what needs to really change moving forward for publishers to work with the gambling industry?
Well, yeah, I think they'll hit it on the head is that, currently the only way we kind of work with it is by building a strong community that people want to play and compete in, and then the gambling becomes a fallout of the community already being there. I think in order to have the in-casino gambling of games, especially like PvP, there needs to be these, like Bill was saying, the regulatory education of these regulatory requirements, so that we can have a template for which game developers to build their content on, So therefore, just like slot machines, just like any other gambling machine that's in the casinos, those are all regulated and they're built. So the developers that build content for these individual kind of games are built with these regulations in mind, and they're built within the parameters of what these games can do. And so it's new content, it's shiny, it's new screens, it's new attractions for these different kinds of slots or roulette or all these different kind of poker and all these different kind of like video betting. But they adhere to the base standards that have already been set by the regulatory committees. And so we need to, in order to have this kind of in-casino content, we need these templates, if you will, these regulations to be understood for a developer to be able to build within that package, if you will.
Do you think there are other issues, really that, let's say, need to be overcome other than the regulatory and standard point of view, or do you think that's obviously one of the core components, but do you think there's anything else other than those, let's say, main elements?
Well, funding is a big thing. If you look at a lot of the content that's being developed for in the gaming industry, especially for like XR and like VR specifically, a lot of it is kind of bootstrapped and just kind of experimental and develop 2 to 3 person teams building compelling, innovative content. And a lot of times they're just self-funded. They don't really have a lot of backing. In 2016, we had a huge amount of funding for indie developers to build innovative content, and a lot of that dried up, not because the money wasn't there, but because the statistical analysis of what's successful wasn't available to measure against. And so in order for the development community to dig in deep to support casinos with compelling content, we need the casinos to help fund, even if it's just coming up with a fund, to develop a publishing fund or partner with publishers that make compelling content to then take that to the next level and be able to fund compelling, innovative content that also adheres to what I mentioned earlier, the kind of regulations and what works well for the casinos to be engaged with it. So it's more than just spectation and gambling on the sites, but it's really something that can be measured and odds can be played against. And just like any other professional sport, the people that are competing on it are licensed and have this kind of roadmap to how to become a major competitor, how to become a league, how to become pro, how to become semi-pro, and gain their accolades and their provenance as a competitor in esports. And that's where I think it needs to evolve.
Bill, is that the same thing regarding terms of what you think other, let's say, steps are on to overcome it, and what steps would you say really are, and that's needs to really happen in the next 5 years to try and get more of a collaboration between both the gambling and gaming industry?
Well, in the last talk, we talked a little bit about intellectual properties, and there's a lot of intellectual property that's available in that can be built into games that would make it very unique into a casino brand that they could have their own esports, intellectual type stuff that will bring customers into the casinos, betting on the players, different things like that. Definitely the casinos can be working with the developers on that. And again, I keep saying the regulations need to be very, very clear. Years ago, I remember when ticketing first came, the slot machines, my private company, every jurisdiction had almost a different version of the software for the ticketing system. It's kind of frustrating because they're all over the place. It was new. So it's almost like everybody made different regulations. And it took them years to finally have a very consistent regulatory environment. But now every casino has ticketing. Everybody has to say, different systems, but just can't fill every merchant. So I think it's very important to get the esports community to work with the casinos and the regulators on having very consistent, activity viewers, like back-end systems that, very clear to developers what's needed to be in this marketplace. Which is a lot different than what's needed to be on a consumer, platform. To be on a casino platform, we definitely, the regulators would want certain, very things that are built into the software, and the developers need to know that from the beginning. Because you can really, you ask them to go back and change their code. In the casino market, a game that's millions and millions of code that's been written, and then all of a sudden, we need to see every time someone logs in, we need to see every developer, what they've done, the changes that they want. So it's very important that the publishers understand what the regulators need. But there are other regulations really right now. So again, we got to work with them to come up with a consistent system.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's, every Konami, there's a handful of game development companies that understand the regulations that adhere to slot machines or these other, in casino machines. And they understand it, so they build with these parameters in mind. And so that's why you don't see every indie developer building slot machines either, because there's a lot of education on how the games have to function. What's good for a mobile slot machine isn't necessarily going to fly for the in-casino games. This stuff has to be monitorable. They have to, have, the odds have to be set and be able to be analyzed and all these things. So the code has to be transparent for the regulators to be able to, test and be able to make sure. And so, especially when it comes to like VR content and using your body as the controller, basically you need to be able to regulate, just as in boxing, they regulate what you're allowed to do in the ring and how you're allowed to move around and how you're allowed to be in your weight class and how you're allowed as a professional, who you're allowed to fight, and as a semi-professional, who you're allowed to fight. These are very, very similar structures that need to be set into place for esports, for it to evolve into a place where like developers like ourselves and publishers can get behind a product and bring it to market inside the games, inside the casino, so that it's more than just an arcade cabinet or an experience. It's more than just an attraction, but rather it really is one of the casino games that becomes an ROI for the casinos.
Fantastic. So I think it would be great also from the point of view, both of you being partnership and workers, obviously, game publisher. What you both talk quite a lot about IP. So what do you think is, let's say, the answer to gambling and gaming working together in the respective IP? Do you think it's monetary, or what other ways in which can you see an answer or a solution to that aspect of the two industries working together?
Yeah, IP is very important. I mean, if you look at slot machines right now, if you go into any casino and you look at the top earning slot machines, it's Wheel of Fortune, it's, Walking Dead, it's, the well-known IPs that are licensed to these games, because it's an attraction for the people to want to choose this machine over that machine, to spend their $20 or their $100 here versus there. And so, IP and content creates the platform. So we need that partnership of big IP into these into this platform. But the intellectual property holders, they're not using their IP to invest. They want to license their IP. And so, and typically the development studios and publishing studios, they don't have a lot of times the resources to license a really big IP. So what we need is essentially the casino investors and this side of the platform to step up and partner with publishing studios to acquire IP or to acquire a license for an IP so that it can be utilized in the best way, so that it's not bootstrapped, so it feels like a premium AAA gambling experience. That I think is what's going to be required to bring this into the next stage.
And Bill, what about from your perspective, do you think, if you need to repeat the question, I will.
I kind of agree with everything that Finn was saying. I mean, as it relates to intellectual property, again, going back to rules, you're never going to get those IP holders to file any sort of licensing agreements. And the same thing is, I'm pretty sure Wheel of Fortune and, the different licensees don't have any regulation on. Again, it's more of either the platform providers or the indie developers that are, like Phil was talking about earlier about building a practice system. From my experience, yes, if you're building a practice system, you need to be licensed, you need to be approved. You need to do that. But then when you come to something like these large, like esports games, where it's more of that people. To me, those games are more like a football team, where they're not really building anything for the casino business. It's more of a betting platform. So I would say the betting platform company is what it needs to be. And I think the regulations understand that there's two different parts of it. And again, I go back to, it's going to be our responsibility as leaders in the esports community to work with these regulators on making sound rules that are very understandable to them, to casinos, and to the different stakeholders in the whole business.
Fantastic. So, really talking from, do you think there's any other, let's say, legal issues that really need to be worked out apart from the IP for game publishers? Obviously, there's a regulatory aspect and standardization, but from legal game publishers to working with the gambling industry, is there really anything outside of those areas that you would say need to be really addressed moving forward?
Yeah, I have no experience with that. So the problem's going to be that once the regulators hear the word software, in their minds, that's something, we could look at, like source code. And they're going to, if we don't guide them, they're going to start saying, well, any sort of betting, we're going to want to have it go through our gaming labs, and we're going to want to analyze the source code. But you're not going to get the major games to be willing to give out the source code because they make so much money on the consumer side. And then they don't make any money on people betting on their game. Why would they even think about that? Like, I'm not making any money. I'm just running this like league outside the casino. And you people want to have people that are going to bet on it. What's my interest in that? So, again, and I would say over and over, I think the industry, there probably needs to be a lobbying group on our end saying, hey, we like the esports lobbying, probably a good thing like someone like Harry run, where he's got a lot of experience running casinos, where there's some sort of lobbying group to help them make regulations that are sound and that make sense for these different things. And I really, I kind of see it's going to be a mess, and I'm trying to get ahead of it right now. That's why I'm speaking so much about it. Like, now's the time for us to get ahead of that. Because once these regulations are made, to get them changed is like moving a mountain. You're going to have legislators that are going to be meeting, you're going to have people that know nothing about esports, that, are lawyers that are going to be, like in Pennsylvania and Harrisburg, and you're going to have a lot of self-interest making regulations for them. And if we don't get ahead of that, we're going to have a lot of trouble. So we definitely need to, get ahead of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about again, I keep going back to boxing. Boxing's a great example of the direction that esports needs to evolve into. In boxing, you have to become licensed to fight and to compete, and then you have to rise in the rankings to become pro level. And currently, the professional gaming esports players are backed by sponsors when they're on a team, and they're competing to win a kitty, but there's much less. They're not licensed to be able to compete, and so therefore the casinos find hesitancy in being able to allow betting on the odds of these players' performance because they're not licensed competitors. Once we evolve the gaming sector for the esports gaming sector as a hierarchy of structure so that to be a competitor, to be a professional, you have to abide by, similar regulations to how boxers have to abide by. Then, if you break these guidelines, you lose your license and you can no longer compete professionally. Those are some of the evolutionary parts of esports that once those come into play for the competitors, then you're going to be able to start having the casinos taking bets and like booking platforms be able to take bets on the players' performances, because literally they're going to be a licensed competitor similar to a boxer or a pro golfer or a basketball player, because they're going to be licensed under a guideline and stuff. And so that's one of the areas that I think is just a big piece that's going to kind of evolve. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely understand what you mean. I believe we have a question there in the audience.
I just wanted to back up to regulation for a minute. My name is Jack Budd. If you have a guest, I'm a regulator. I'm with Southern Indian Tribe. So what we're talking about, developing regulations for esports in a casino. When it relates to a slot machine, we have minimum requirements for the equipment of that slot machine, bill validator, cabinets, whatever. Software is developed by the industry. It is then submitted to a third party, GLI, BMM, or whoever, and they give their rubber stamp approval, and then it's approved in different jurisdictions. So my question is, what would be a good third party to have that review done in the case of what you gentlemen are talking about?
Well, that's great. That's great. I mean, GLI would be a perfect solution for that. They would have to evolve, I think, and to have the regulator or the reviewer, a new branch, if you will, but not really too far outside of what they're already doing. I mean, a lot of the top casino slot machines are made with Unity. A lot of the best games are made with Unity. They understand the code base. They understand the project structure. I think the wall there is that since the developers aren't building with that in mind, it makes it almost, it makes it like a bowl of spaghetti trying to look through it. Versus if the regulation, if there was a template of some sort, just like for slot machines, there's essentially a template that they build within. So they can do certain things and make the timing slightly different or make the visuals and the fanfare slightly different. But overall, the slot machine performs as it is allowed to within those structures. And so the development companies like Every or these other software development companies in the industry, they build the software to the regulation specifics so that once it gets submitted to GLI, it's understood on how to break it down, how to look through it. They go through the source and make sure there's nothing shady or crooked in there, and then it passes, right? And so very similarly, I think we need to have some of these regulations in place, or just some documentation really on coming from GLI saying this is what we'll allow, right? And then developers can say, okay, let's work within that, and come up with a really cool game idea that works within that. You know what I mean? And so that therein lies the opportunity for them to kind of allow, the new design and new compelling content, but still within a regulation.
Yeah, I want to comment a little bit on that. Like, I've seen from my past experience with GLI, yes, they'll put out what the specs are, but then you'll have like GG, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania with different specs. So again, I'll go back to us having an industry where we work with GLI, we work with GG. We come up with it satisfies the GLI requirements. If it satisfy, the UK, in Toronto, Canadian gambling, you have these, like GLI wants specific things, but they're not going to complain if you have also what New Jersey wants and what Ohio wants and Canada wants. As you know, as a regulator, there's a lot of different regs going on. So someone needs to put together, and it's usually because for us to have our own group where we can advise the publishers on what it needed. When they create these new games and, hey, if you want to you need the casino, you know, if you want to have a distributor, you know, like a local distributor to have your game, you're gonna have to do your source code. It's gonna have to be looked at. You need to have these requirements. You know, you need to be able to, you know, everybody that touches that software, you need to know who. You can't have somebody like in, I don't want to be like based in India or something, but they not know who that guy is. You need to track it from the beginning and know everything, and you need to have all these activity, you know, activity log and all that stuff that's going on with software.
Thank you. So do you think, I'm guessing is the, just a pretty standard answer to this, but do you think it's very crucial to have obviously the same regulations and standards across obviously all states and regions, or do you think there's actually room for differential between state, region, countries?
You'll never get the same regulations. It's just, there's a lot of, you're never gonna have the same regulations, but what you can have is a sheet. Like, we work in the VR industry, and there's like WebXR now all the manufacturers have an API for that, and it's all the same. I'm not a programmer, I'm on parameters. Yeah, like standards. So if somebody, I guess like an independent in our industry, in esports, was to go out and analyze all the regulations throughout the world, Australia, UK, as I said, even New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and then publish something where this is what you guys are gonna need to perform for everybody. But you're not gonna have New Jersey to agree. It's almost like sometimes they always put something thinking. That question specifically got me kind of thinking the way we evolve this content as a developer is, so typically a lot of these games that I mentioned before, League of Legends, Dota 2, Counter-Strike Go, those are games that are played with very in-depth combination of gameplay strategies. It's a very deep intertwining game with a bunch of different elements in it. And so those games are never going to be regulated. They're not going to fit into a regulation. They have a really great community of people that are competing to be the best. That's a completely different thing than what's going to be allowed on the casino floor, unless it's for like an attraction for people to, watch the tournament on the casino floor. But then it's almost more like a show or like anything else, like an attraction for the casino to hold and bring more people in. If we're talking about the kind of thing where we want people to compete, the elements that the developer works within so that it can be submitted to a company like GLI and make its way through is make it simple, fun, and competitive. So it's simple, so it can go through the code analytics. It's fun, so people actually want to play it, and it's competitive, so it makes sense to be a platform by which it gambles through. Those three combinations, if they can make because oftentimes it's competitive and fun, but not very simple. Or sometimes it's simple and fun and not very competitive, or simple and competitive, but not very fun, right? And so you got to have all three of those. You got to be simple, competitive, and super fun, so that you have people wanting to play it, but you also and competing on it. But it also needs to have a simplified structure to what the gameplay actually is, so that it can be measured and the outline. There's no crazy loopholes because of the huge systems design behind some of these other big in-depth games like Dota 2, for instance, has all kinds of different play styles and strategies, and that is kind of hard to get past one of these regulation companies or one of these review companies, because there's almost no way they can't gauge everything, because you'll see these games coming up with new strategies to be the best 2 years after it's been out, right? These deep and big AAA games. And so we need high fidelity so it looks AAA and it feels good, but the gameplay needs to be essentially a vertical slice that's really fun. So it's just a vertical slice of a single style of game dynamic that's really fun and engaging and able to be reviewed by a company like GLI.
Yeah, so one thing which is always, let's say, going to be massively in the eye when it comes to gambling and also gaming industry working together, is really the ethical issues associated with it. So, for example, match fixing and different things like that. How do you think there are ways, or what do you think? Sorry, actually speaking English. How do you think that can actually be addressed moving forward? And do you think that really comes down to both, or does it only come down to the game publishers?
It's up to the game publishers to, like I said, create a simplified game that people can play. But I think that goes in line with like kind of what I was saying earlier, where in order to be a competitor, you have to earn a license. And in order to keep that license, you have to abide by those license agreements. Same thing as if you're a boxer and you take a flop, your license gets revoked, right? You can't match fix things professionally and keep your license as a professional competitor, and so like I feel like that's essentially the reason behind creating that structure of amateur, semi-pro, pro level gamer and competitor is to keep people in line and not match fix, and basically have penalties in place that, just like if you're a boxer and you take a dive, then you're going to get fined, you're going to get your license revoked, you're not going to be able to compete anymore. These are, and not just boxing, but other professional sports that the casinos allow gambling on. That's how the casinos adhere to these people aren't going to be match fixing, because otherwise they'd be fined and all these things would happen to them. And so I think that's maybe how we kind of plan from the top down approach.
Yeah, Finn was really talking about what I would call employee license, and that is different than a software license. So you really have two different things there. I mean, gaming, employee license, pretty much every jurisdiction has, to be able to be on the casino floor to get licensed. That was, I guess the platform provider, they should be on site, gonna have to put those applications in. But as you're talking about publishers, that's more of the software license or manufacturer. They have different names for different areas. So it's almost two different things going on there.
So, really want to head towards final remarks, as we only have 5 minutes left, unfortunately. Is there really any, let's say, the evolution, where would you like to see gambling and gaming industry working over the next 10 years? And where do you think really the limit or the ceiling to really both industry working together are?
I mean, I want to see. I want to see more of this content in the space, right? There was they kind of tiptoed into the game to the casino floor and treated it like an arcade cabinet. Like virtual reality was kind of treated like an attraction. I'd like to see it treated as a more like a tournament platform. So like the PvP, I think is really the best way of going about it, because then you can have these games with in-depth strategy and don't need to be essentially, go through such rigorous regulation to have people compete against each other. Because essentially what they're doing, they're putting up their money to compete against each other rather than, gambling against odds. They're essentially, one PvP, putting money into the pool and winner takes the pool, right? That's a really simple structure that then could pay out, and people could essentially, the house could take a fee for the tournaments to take place. That would be beneficial both for spectating and the competing and the opportunity to win and all these things. And it would also give the structure to the developers and publishers that are trying to bring this content to market, and an opportunity to like partner with something like, with a Luxor or with one of these Excalibur or one of these Wynn or one of these big casinos that have extravagant locations inside, and would be an amazing opportunity for a developer to be in there. That partnership could come out of something like that, out of an agreement where the structure and the visuals and everything is built so that the casino can essentially manage this this competitive platform. It's almost, and then by doing that, then you can start the structure of what it takes to become a competitor, and that notion of earning your stripes on, becoming semi-pro, becoming pro level and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I definitely think the publishers need to understand the difference between like online gambling, like esports that they're doing online, and then brick and mortar gambling, which in other words, you're bringing an event to the casino where you're bringing people into the casino to play. So those are almost two different business lines, and part of the regulation should be different, on that type of stuff. So we really got to break it up, online esports and brick and mortar esports. So it's two different goals going on there. We both have betting on it, but two different goals.
And but we'll finish up with this because I believe there is actually one more question in the audience.
But yeah, that question's for me. Just wanted to quickly ask you guys, with the advancement of the technology, what do you think the barrier of entry is for from the publishing side getting more involved, like the bigger publishers and the mainstream games? Is this a public relation issue, or is this we getting involved in the gambling thing? I mean, at this point, Disney bought, I think, like they own like 6% of DraftKings. So what is, and then so that's Disney, and that's been, the very pure type of puritanical type of, Mickey Mouse, and now they're getting involved in gambling. So obviously there is a push towards that move, and it's all driven by money, of course, but why isn't Activision Blizzard, why isn't Riot, why isn't Valve? And I know that have these games, aren't they helping game work hand in hand with the casino industry? Is it a population problem? That's my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think maybe a little from column A, a little from column B. People do have in certain areas, legislative conflictions with the gambling. But yeah, I think it's gonna, like I said, it's kind of that approach of Vegas is a really great place for this to kick off, and whenever the viability and the ROI are shown from something like this, then that'll catch like wildfire. That's what it needs to happen, though. We need to have, we first need to have it successful, and then once there's a successful statistical analysis on how to run this, then I think other cities, other places will be able to pick this up. And the good thing about the PvP gambling is that essentially that would be allowed in many other places that, slot machines even aren't allowed. There's a lot of places where slot machine and those kind of things aren't allowed, but still allow for like things like poker tournaments because you're essentially buying in and you're allowed, and that's not illegal in many of the places where casinos are. So,
Yeah, it's definitely about relations. I think everybody thinks games is associated with that, but especially when it comes to esports, a lot of millennials are very big into esports. So I think the regulators shy away, right away. All the legislators are like, it's kids, so they need to be educated. Again, we have an industry that would help educate that hey, here's the statistics. A lot of millennial females are very into esports. It's not just kids. We're not going to allow kids on the gambling side of it. With the very large publishers, it's also monetary. They're making so much money selling these games on Valve and Steam, so they look at it as a casino business. We had the same problem with VR, but now we have titles that are being made in VR that, are doing over almost $200 million, coming out of the box in revenue. So now that, now all the IP companies all of a sudden are like, hey, VR, hey guys, now we're interested in you guys. But when it was like 5 million, 10 million, there was no interest. So into somebody, we always hustle at chicken waffle. You have a very successful esports type thing for the casinos, and we like to focus on I mean, I think it's more brick and mortar to get people, into the locations. It's online. A lot of people are now online gambling, but if we can get people to come into casinos to do esports, the casinos will see the value of that. They'll see, hey, I can get that person to the casino. They're coming in for this tournament. They're gonna then buy liquor. They're gonna play a slot machine. They're gonna book a hotel room. There's a lot of revenue attached to that. And then they'll be able to spend more money, which then the bigger publishers will be able to come into. But until that money's there,
Yeah.
it's an issue.
Thank you. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you coming on. Finn and Bill, you've been totally cooperative. It's so exciting to have Chicken Waffle Studios here. And I hope to see George. I hope to see you live next year at the CEC. And just to stay tuned, it was very nice. So thank you so much for attending, and we'll see you hopefully next year. Thank you.
Living if you're already there, it's not worth saying if it's already said. Even if it all goes over your head, believe it if you want to. So keep your eyes on the road and your head in the stars. Follow it down the rabbit hole just a little while longer. You can change anything if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to. Sing it like ooh.